Before we dive into this suspenseful story, please drop a comment with your city so we can see how far it reaches. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Under the glow of a fading sunset, the street was quiet. Too quiet. Darius Cole had just pulled into the driveway of his home, a modest house on the edge of town, the kind of place built not just with bricks and paint, but with years of sacrifice, discipline, and relentless work. He carried 2 bags of groceries in his hands, his tie loosened after a long day at the office. But as he stepped onto his porch, the stillness cracked. Headlights cut sharply into his yard, blinding him for a moment. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel. Slow, steady, deliberate. 3 men emerged from the shadows, wearing dark uniforms with badges that looked official, but not quite right. Their stance was too aggressive, their hands twitching too eagerly at their belts. One of them barked out, "You're trespassing! Put the bags down!" Confusion tightened in his chest. Trespassing? On his own property? His heart skipped, but instinct told him to stay calm. The bags slipped from his hands, groceries spilling onto the wooden steps. Something about their eyes told him this wasn't routine, wasn't official. It was a hunt. They weren't cops. They were something else. And the terrifying thought struck him. What if no one ever believed his side of the story? What if this moment were the end of his story? He was about to find out. Darius was not just any man. At 41, with sharp features, warm brown skin, and eyes that carried the weight of years in law enforcement, he had lived a life that most people couldn't imagine. By day, he was a decorated FBI agent, a man whose name commanded respect in courtrooms and whose work had dismantled criminal networks. But to his neighbors, he was simply Darius, the man who jogged at sunrise, waved to kids playing on the block, and mowed his own lawn on Saturday mornings. His home, a 2-story brick house on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood, was his sanctuary, his proof that hard work could carve out a slice of peace in a world that rarely offered it freely to men who looked like him. Yet, even in that peace, he carried a constant awareness. Every trip to the store, every walk through his neighborhood, was shadowed by the unspoken truth that his skin color could erase his identity in an instant. He had grown used to double glances in convenience stores, to questions that came loaded with suspicion rather than curiosity. Still, he pushed forward, believing his position, his badge, and his discipline offered him some shield against the ugliest parts of reality. On that evening, with his tie undone and a tired sigh on his lips, he thought only of dinner and rest. But as the headlights flared across his lawn and figures moved toward him, that illusion of safety cracked. It was as if the years of careful building, of proving, of enduring, had been erased in a blink. The ordinary night had turned extraordinary, and not in the way anyone wished. The men closed in, their boots grinding against gravel, their presence swelling like a storm cloud ready to burst. Darius's instincts sharpened, his years of training whispering warnings in his mind. Something about their uniforms was off. The patches didn't align. The badges gleamed too new. Their belts hung heavy but awkward, as though borrowed. One spoke again, this time sharper, ordering him to kneel, claiming he was in violation for trespassing. The absurdity hit him. Trespassing on his own land. But he saw no humor in their eyes. These men weren't here to ask questions. They were here to break him. His pulse thundered as he calculated options. Comply and risk humiliation. Or resist, and risk worse. The grocery bag had split, apples rolling down the steps, a carton of milk leaking across the wood. It seemed too fitting, something pure spilling out, ruined, while darkness encroached. The neighbor's curtains shifted, faint movements suggesting witnesses peering out but unwilling to intervene. The air thickened, charged with menace. When one of the men reached for what looked like a taser, Darius knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an execution of intimidation. His hands twitched at his side, the urge to reveal his badge burning in his chest. But timing was everything. Show it too soon, and they might not care. Show it too late, and it might not matter. The men's shadows stretched longer under the floodlights, their authority built on deception, but backed by real malice. Every step they took pushed Darius closer to the edge of something irreversible. And then the words came. Last chance. Get on the ground. His breath caught, his body rigid. The neighborhood was silent, but watching. Phones were coming out, cameras catching fragments. Yet even in that moment, Darius wondered, would those recordings save him, or would they become the last echoes of his existence? The night had shifted into a trap, and the jaws were closing. The taser crackled, bright and violent, splitting the silence like lightning. Darius froze, every nerve in his body alert, every second stretched into eternity. The man holding it stepped closer, his sneer visible in the pale glow of the headlights. Darius's knees bent slightly, ready for impact, ready for pain. But before the weapon touched him, a voice shattered the tension. From across the street, a neighbor shouted, trembling yet defiant, "That's Agent Darius Cole! He's FBI!" The words rippled through the air, sharp as a siren. The crowd that had begun to gather gasped, murmurs rising in waves. Phones zoomed closer, whispers turned into shouts. "He's not trespassing! This is his house!" The men in fake uniforms faltered. Their act, so carefully constructed, began to unravel in real time. One lowered the taser with a curse. Another tugged at his cap, trying to obscure his face from the recording eyes locked on him. Panic flickered, where confidence had reigned moments ago. Darius straightened slowly, his chest pounding, his jaw clenched. His groceries lay ruined at his feet, but his presence grew taller, heavier, and undeniable. With deliberate calm, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge. Under the harsh streetlight, it gleamed like a weapon more powerful than anything they carried. Gasps filled the night air, and the shift was palpable. The hunted had become the proof. The men stumbled backwards, their fake authority dissolving into shame. They muttered excuses, tried to twist the narrative, but the damage was done. The cameras had caught it all. For the first time that night, the power dynamic fractured, and it was not in their favor. But inside, Darius felt no victory, because the truth was unshakable. If he hadn't been who he was, if he hadn't carried that badge, this night might have ended differently. And that thought haunted him more than anything else. The crackle of the taser was cut short, not by Darius's resistance, but by the sudden weight of the truth breaking through the chaos. A neighbor, trembling but determined, shouted into the night, "He's FBI! That's Agent Darius Cole!" The words sliced through the tension like a blade. Cameras zoomed closer, and murmurs grew into a chorus. "He's not a criminal. He works for the government." The men in fake uniforms froze. Their carefully staged performance was unraveling, their authority dissolving under the light of recognition. One of them cursed under his breath, lowering the taser. Another tugged at his cap, trying to shield his face from the dozens of recording phones now capturing every second. They had come to intimidate, to humiliate, to erase, but instead, they had exposed themselves. Darius straightened slowly, his chest heaving, his groceries still scattered across the porch. He reached into his jacket, not with the urgency of fear, but with the deliberate weight of certainty. His badge gleamed in the streetlight, cold and undeniable. The crowd gasped, whispers rippling like fire through dry grass. The narrative had shifted in an instant. He was no longer the target. He was the proof of their crime. The men backed away, stumbling over their words, trying to twist the story, but it was too late. The cameras saw everything. The neighborhood saw everything. And for once, silence didn't protect the oppressors. It betrayed them. Within hours, the footage would spread across social media. Headlines would follow, and investigations would begin. The predators had been caught in their own trap. And yet, as Darius stood there, his shirt rumpled, hands still shaking slightly, there was no triumph in his eyes, no victory, because deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't the badge that saved him. It wasn't justice suddenly waking up. It was luck, a neighbor who recognized him, a crowd that refused to lower their phones, a fragile chain of chance that meant he survived where so many others had not. That night, when the porch finally emptied and the police, not the imposters, but the real ones, arrived to take statements, Darius sat alone in his living room. The milk from his broken carton still stained the floor. The apples lay bruised and forgotten in the corner. Ordinary things, now marked forever by what almost happened. And he wondered if he hadn't been Darius Cole, the FBI agent, but just Darius, the black man, would the ending have been the same? The impact was larger than his own bruised dignity. It was a reminder etched in every witness's mind that racism does not ask for proof, does not wait for reason, does not care about titles or achievements. It reduces a man to the color of his skin and dares the world to challenge its cruelty. His story was not unique. It was a mirror reflecting countless untold stories, neighbors without badges, men and women without witnesses, voices silenced before they could explain who they were. For every Darius who lived to tell, how many others never got that chance? And that is the question that lingers long after the cameras shut off, long after the headlines fade. How many more doors will be broken open? How many porches stained with humiliation? How many lives cut short before this cycle ends? This was not just Darius's story. This is America's story, and it keeps repeating. So the question remains, how many more times will we watch this happen before the world finally decides it's